Hello and welcome to Mortgage Solutions. I'm your host, Mark Rigney. For many homeowners, the idea of foreclosure is devastating. Oftentimes, homeowners ignore the situation and do nothing until it's too late. Mortgage foreclosures continue to rise at a rapid pace, and local governments face many challenges to assist homeowners. On today's show, we're going to give struggling homeowners steps to take when facing a foreclosure. Whether you or someone you know is facing foreclosure, you need to be aware of your options and rights and who to seek for qualified advice. Homeowners should become proactive to find help locally and through the government to avoid this crisis. James Scruggs, Managing Attorney for Legal Services of Northern Virginia, is in our studio today. James is going to educate us on steps a struggling homeowner can take to avoid foreclosure. Hi, James, and thanks for being here.
Mark. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. James, why don't we start by telling us what services your office provides?
Well, Legal Services of Northern Virginia is a nonprofit law firm, and we provide advice and counsel and, in merited cases, representation, and these are civil cases for low-income and disabled residents of Northern Virginia. And we have a number of different practice areas. We have a family law unit that focuses on assistance with victims of domestic violence. We have an elder law unit that focuses on cases that are of particular concern to elderly residents, such as wills and medical directives and nursing home issues. We have a public benefits unit that assists people with such issues as obtaining food stamps or TANF or disability claims. And we also have housing and consumer units, and those are the two units I work with. And in those units, we offer assistance, among other things, to homeowners who are facing foreclosure.
Okay. Now, you mentioned lower incomes. How do you determine how much their income and if they can be, qualified to utilize your program?
We have several different grants and funding sources, but primarily we're funded through the State Legal Services Corporation and the Federal Legal Services Corporation, and that limits primarily our eligibility guidelines to people who are at 200% of the federal poverty level. The federal government regularly updates and provides information and says that at this level the person is poor, and then we can take 200% of that level. And what we have is an intake system, and when people call, we'll take financial information, and our computers will calculate that for people.
Oh, is that right? So you've actually had to turn people away before?
We do, unfortunately, have to turn people away in certain instances because we do have limits on our funding.
Okay. Now, what would you recommend the first steps a struggling homeowner should take that is facing a foreclosure?
That's a good question, and the first thing is hopefully the homeowner's taken some steps before we're in the foreclosure.
Like I said, they need to be proactive.
Absolutely. And hopefully people who are at that stage where they realize they're going to have problems making the mortgage payments, a good step to take is to find a housing counselor, a HUD-certified housing counselor.
Is that something they could do through your office, or they go online?
They can do through our office, or they can go through HUD's website. That's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I always emphasize this. HUD actually provides training and certification for people to do what's called housing counseling. And this is not something new. This has been around for a while. And these are organizations that have gone through HUD, had training through HUD. And they have counselors designed to assist homeowners who are now having trouble making their mortgage payments. And they work with the servicers and with the lenders to find, hopefully, a positive resolution. And HUD also provides grants for different organizations to provide this service for free. So even if, for example, someone isn't eligible for our services, there are organizations within the community which will provide housing counseling services and will not charge for it. We emphasize that people should not pay for housing counseling services. They're not going to receive better services simply because they pay for it. In fact, often the opposite is true.
Really? So there are organizations out there that charge for housing counseling?
Yes, there are. Usually it may be in combination with offering some real estate services or something else, and may be steering people into services they don't need. What we should also understand is that in many cases the attempt to collect an upfront fee to try and negotiate a loan modification is actually a violation of the Virginia Consumer Protection Act. One of the problems we face, though, is these businesses come and go, so often by the time we see a client, the business has folded or they've restructured and changed names and gone on to another community. We strongly emphasize that people don't pay for housing counseling services. They may have to wait for the nonprofit agency a little bit, but they will not get better services. They will get the best services through an agency that is a HUD-certified housing counseling agency.
So, James, before you meet with a client, you'll require them to go through some type of housing counseling,
No,
correct?
no, we don't require that. If someone's eligible for our services, this is one way that we can distinguish ourselves from just a strict housing counseling agency, because we have lawyers available. We've all gone through housing counseling training through the Virginia Housing and Development Authority, VHDA.
Right.
They've trained us and we've had their certification process. So we have experienced housing counselors on staff, as well as attorneys. So we like to have a sort of a two-pronged approach. We want to review the paperwork of the client and make sure that there aren't some potential legal claims. There aren't a whole lot. The law in Virginia tends to be a little more friendly to the creditor, but we still want to make sure that the client's legal rights are being protected and the client is aware of his or her legal rights and responsibilities. But we will also do the housing counseling. We will also help people negotiate with the lender and apply for a modification and explore what different options that may be available.
Name some other benefits of how a struggling homeowner can benefit from your services.
Among the benefits, as I said, would be an assessment, a legal assessment, housing counseling services.
And they're not charged for that
They're
at
not
all?
charged for the services.
That's great.
One of the things that we can offer, for example, sometimes for some homeowners, one of the hurdles to getting to a loan modification is they have an excessive debt load. So if that's the case, and if the lender, we're working with the lender and the lender identifies that, sometimes we'll use bankruptcy as a route. Bankruptcy doesn't necessarily stop a foreclosure, but it can relieve a lot of excessive debt, and that makes some cases that will make the client more attractive for a loan modification because there's more income that's freed up to be applied toward a restructured loan.
I see.
And that's a service that we offer as well.
Okay. Are there any costs at all involved in utilizing any of your services?
Our services are absolutely free. The only cost that may be applied would be if there are filing fees, for example, in a court action, or some administrative fees from whichever agency or court or what have you that we're working with. But in terms of accessing our services for our time, those are absolutely free.
Wow. I guess it's fair to say that the sooner they contact you throughout the process, the better off it is for them.
The sooner the better, absolutely.
Does it get to a point where it's too late? That they've got the letter in the mail or whatever? Is there?
That's a good question, and it's because it depends on how we define too late. One of the things people need to understand, the ideal loan modification setup is through what's called the Home Affordable Modification Program. This is President Obama's plan.
Right, right.
And under the requirements for that, we have to have submitted an application for a modification. They have to have it at least 7 business days if there's a foreclosure in process, or the lender is not required to stop the foreclosure. And that often lenders will follow that even if they're going to do a traditional loan modification as well. So it's a good rule of thumb. But even beyond that, if it's past the 7 business days and we're looking down, staring at a deadline, we'd still want to talk to the homeowner, make sure the notices are proper, make sure the homeowner understands the timeline of what's going to happen, not just at foreclosure, but also post-foreclosure as well. People have to understand that sometimes the foreclosure can still be called off. Sometimes it doesn't go through for other reasons. The lender's decided not to go through with it. But people also need to understand that once the foreclosure sale has gone through, Virginia generally does not favor self-help eviction, so the new owner, which will typically be the bank, will probably have to go through the eviction process through the court if the new owners don't leave. So I would want people to understand that even if there's been a foreclosure sale, they're not going to come home the next day and find locks changed, because at least in this area, the courts frown on that, and they actually have an eviction docket now in Fairfax for the post-foreclosure evictions for the homeowners who are still in the house. So, and that will actually be several weeks. It could be a month or 2 or more after. It depends on who's purchased the property and how eager the new purchaser is to get into the property and market it. In some cases, some banks have such a backlog of homes in their inventory that they purchased.
Wow.
They actually may be a while post-foreclosure before they actually go through the eviction. So it's important that the homeowner doesn't just also abandon the property.
Right, right.
And there is actually, I have to say, another legal issue with that. People need to be certain if they are leaving the property because there has been a foreclosure, that there indeed has been a foreclosure.
You've encouraged people that lost their homes and haven't been foreclosed upon?
Well, we've had people who thought their homes were in foreclosure and their foreclosure sale didn't go through.
Oh,
and this is a very
okay.
important point. As long as the homeowner's name is on the title, that homeowner is the person that's responsible, well, not just for the mortgage, but for taxes, for homeowners association fees. That's the liable person if someone is injured, for example, a slip and fall on the property, the tree on that property falls on the neighbor's property.
Right.
It's the person who's on the title. So that's also something else we want to make sure of if someone, even if we are at the last minute and someone is facing foreclosure, that there is going to be a foreclosure. We've had cases of people who have thought there was going to be a sale and left, and the sale didn't go through. We've also had cases where people were the victims of a foreclosure rescue scammer who told them that their home was in foreclosure, and it wasn't. And then they come to us afterward, and they have utility bills, they have homeowners association fees that haven't been paid because there was no foreclosure and they're still the owner of record on the property.
You mentioned loan modifications, and you're hearing in the news nowadays that there's so difficulty, the lenders are giving a lot of difficulty getting those approved. Is that what you're incurring, or what's your experience with loan mods lately?
Well, our experience has been, it varies with the lender. What people have to understand is that there are so many people applying for loan modifications that the lenders themselves are having trouble keeping up with all of the applications and all of the requests.
So you don't think it's a delaying tactic at all so that the lender can foreclose? They're dragging on the loan mod, keep dragging it on, and then all of a sudden they're going to hit you with a foreclosure. You're not experiencing that?
No, I don't think it's purposefully a delay tactic. Based upon when we've gone to trainings and presentations where servicers are present, what they're telling us that they'll say, for example, they may just have a wall from floor to ceiling and that fills up the entire room, one entire wall, and it's just nothing but applications to be processed.
Oh my gosh.
So just the sheer volume. People have to understand that they need to be patient with that, and there's a lot of paperwork going back and forth. And so it does sometimes require multiple applications. Sometimes it requires sending the same information multiple times. It requires a lot of patience.
Wow.
But we are trying to get the homeowner to that point where hopefully we can get a loan modification. And the whole idea in the process is that the homeowner, we want to convince the servicer or demonstrate to the servicer that it's in the servicer or lender's interest to modify this loan. It's better to modify than to go into foreclosure, because that's what the servicer is weighing, or the lender is going to weigh throughout the process at each step. Is it better for us to try and do a modification, or is it better for us to proceed to foreclosure?
When is a home loan actually considered in default, and is it better for it to be in default before you can get a loan modification approved?
Well, a loan is in default. It's going to depend upon the terms of the loan note and possibly the deed of trust. But as a general rule, if the homeowner has missed a payment,
just one payment,
as that payment, that's usually how the contract will define it. But people should look at their mortgage loan documents, and there will be somewhere it will define what default is. People don't have to be in default to apply for a loan modification. That's a myth. But what they do have to show, there are certain things, they want to show that there's now a hardship. And that means that there is a risk of default that's imminent if some steps aren't taken. So they don't have to actually be in default. They shouldn't